Welcome, everyone, to the Contact Exec Podcast. My name is Robert Zimmerman. Today, I'm here with Ryan and Joe from Cavtera. Sorry, guys, to apologize for that. I have to edit that one out, but anyway, we're here chatting. That you guys just got off the sales call, folks. Today, we've got something special, and I've been waiting for a long time to talk with you guys about Palantir and Foundry. And I had discussed trying to work with, Kavanaugh Industries a long time ago. And then suddenly I'm no longer at this place and you're no longer at one place. And now we're kind of all here together and talking about Palantir, which seems like a bit of a black box for some folks. Everybody, there seems a bit of a mystery. So I've got the experts here today, folks. And so Ryan, Joe, I'm going to just ask whoever wants to take this one first, but what is Foundry? What is Palantir Foundry?
Yeah, we think of it like an ecosystem where you can now, organize or assimilate all your data, which, data sounds kind of like a fancy word, or everybody gets confused by data, but it's, organize the people, the places, the things, and then the verbs, your business, the actions, the things you do every day in one place, and then build applications on top of them. And so, everybody asks what it is, but it's actually just a tool that allows you to do whatever you need to do. And so everyone says, is it an ERP or is it a this or is it a that? And it's like, the answer is actually, it can be all of those things if you want it to be.
Okay. So it's the genie in the bottle. Is that, we kind of ask it to give it three wishes. Ryan, what do you think?
We kind of explain it like it's like a Lego set, right? You can build whatever you need to build. It's got all the tools and things inside of it. Yeah.
Yeah. It really is. It's an ecosystem. It allows you to to ingest, to integrate, and to really build something that, especially in our industry, something that we really haven't been able to imagine before. It's on the other end of the spectrum, from this kind of siloed ecosystem where you have individual solutions solving individual problems. So this is a cohesive way. It's the glue, if you will, to bring everything together. And you can do that to to as narrow or as broadly as really you choose. And that's one of the really, really big powers, or one of the really big testaments to the platform.
Okay. So it's an ecosystem that you have. There's a word that gets thrown around, and he was just on the other day. I can't remember what show he was on, but he was talking about ontology.
Yeah.
So again, this kind of stuff, to, regular construction guys, when you say a word like ontology, you feel like you're at the hospital or something. It's like,
I kind of touched on it I jumped the gun a bit on the earlier example, but, Palantir explains the ontology as the nouns and verbs of your business.
Okay.
And so, that sounds a little abstract, but they're actually right on, so nouns being the person, place, or thing, and then the verbs being actions, right? And so the nouns and verbs of your business are really just the people, places, and things, and those become objects digitized in your ontology. And so though it sounds like data or abstract, it's like you got to manage your people, your equipment, your materials, the work, and then you do actions on top of those. So schedule people, schedule work, move equipment back and forth. Those are the actions of your business. So really ontology is just the nouns and verbs of your business. But again, in construction, that's the work and the resources.
So ontology basically just says, this is what you do. Here's the people that do it. And these are the things that they do. Okay. So that's all ontology is saying, is like, it's a kind of a big word to say, this is your business. It's kind of, this is your business in one word. It's, you have an ontology of some sort. Okay.
It's the digital representation of your business. Again, sounds abstract, but it's, what is a business? You do work with resources.
Well, okay, so now here's one of my pet peeve, guys. And I got to tell you, it's one thing that has bugged me about technology and construction for so long, is that technology uses these big words and it scares the hell out of most construction companies. It scares the hell out of me, because sometimes when I don't understand it, I'm just like, okay, wait a minute. Why did we use that word? Why are we, we're supposed to be, kind of connecting And then when you throw out something like that, if you're a technologist and you're trying to sell some software and you throw out the word ontology, it just sounds like you're trying to sound smart.
You know what? It's, I'm glad you brought that up. And there is this black box effect. And I think it's really important, especially for your viewers to understand, Joe and I are construction guys. We're not computer scientists. We're not technology guys. Like my whole career has been in mining and heavy civil. And, the biggest barrier is, I guess, just getting the courage to open up that box. And once you get over the terminology and this kind of black box effect, and when you start to really practically see what it is, it allows you to just visually visualize your business in a way that you haven't, been able to before. So they have this view that you actually can look at your ontology and look at what you've built in the platform. And I can see when a time card goes in and when it goes to the supervisor application and it gets approved and that starts feeding job costing, I can physically, hit some hotkeys and look at that. It's not code. It's something I can look at. And then early on in our journey, that was something that was really important for me to, as someone that isn't a computer scientist, to be able to visualize what the developers were doing and how they were describing and tackling these problems. And I could participate in a way that just hasn't been possible. Looking at 10 pages of code wasn't going to be something that was going to be useful to me.
I think one thing we do differently too is, we don't start with data or technology or any of that stuff. We start with, what does your business do? It's right. It's like you do work with resources, or you build houses, or you produce asphalt, or you manufacture things. It's what do you do and what are you trying to do? And then we build tools around the best way to work. Palantir allows us to solve, the business problems unencumbered by software, is what we like to say. It's not about the software implementation. It's about solving the problems we need to do with the best tool.
See, you brought up data, lots of talk in the industry. There's the industry talk of you need to have clean data. Okay. I've said it myself, garbage in, kind of garbage out. You can't be using that. There's that 90% number that gets thrown around of data that goes unused, that kind of thing. When I talked to you guys, we kind of touched on the idea of like data entered once, right? We talked about, and I've talked to several companies about this same thing. They're all looking for that same path. They're like, I don't see why I get it from here, and then I've got some manual translation I've got to do in some Excel file, and then I've got to get some data over here. Is that what we're talking about? And when we start talking about ontology and digitizing everything your business does, is kind of creating that atmosphere?
You're totally right. And, we see it as like the saying we like to use is, everybody's thought data was the product, but the way we view it is data is the byproduct of your operations. And so historically, if you wanted to understand your data or, analyze your data, somebody had to enter it in. You finished your day and then you type something in. But the way we approach it is just by doing the things you need to do, which is submit a time card, order a truck, schedule work. The data is the byproduct of doing that. So when you build in the ontology, and that's actually why Foundry is a big differentiator from the way we used to do it, is now just by doing what you need to do day to day, the data is a byproduct. And then you've got all the data, and I hate the word data, frankly. You've got all of the transactions of your day in one place that you can now analyze any way you want. And nobody had to do any extra work to generate it.
Is data just one of those words now that's become overused, and everybody we just glance over it because it's, it's like when people say racism.
Well, it almost is. Yeah.
It's the right word, but it's been, overused, and so it's lost its meaning. Like, data is the right word, but it's meaningless to just look at data. Like, the way I think of data is nobody needs more data on how to lose weight, right? You actually just have to do the thing, right? Like, nobody needs to read another book on how to get 6-packs abs. It's just like move more, eat less. Everyone knows that. And so data is the same thing. We have tons of data. We generate data all day long. We just have to generate it in a way we can use it.
Yeah, and I think I forget that it was maybe I forget if it was during a sales call or what, but someone came up with a good analogy, and this is great. Being up here in Canada, it's like passing the puck. You don't want to have to recreate the puck. You want to, whether it's your dispatch order that you made a request for or your timesheet you put in, you want that information to flow seamlessly, not be recreated at every single interaction. An average, I think, heavy civil PM or heavy civil project manager is going into 14 different platforms, whether it's their spreadsheet or their ERP or their time tracking or their safety. And a big piece of what they're doing is just reproducing information that already exists in another platform. So, you're tying up, these highly skilled and experienced individuals' time, essentially doing administration when they could be put to a higher best use. So that's kind of where the pass the puck analogy comes in. Like, that thing exists. You want it to flow seamlessly between your workflows throughout the day.
We recognize this, from operations. It always killed me when we were out in the field that, at the end of the day, you'd have to enter in how many trucks you used, but it's like you already ordered the trucks. We know that. And so the whole idea of passing that puck up the ice and, generating the data from the things you do day to day came from, living in that world, and the frustration that comes with, I just ordered the trucks. You're telling me I have to enter that all back in at the end of the day. It's like, most of that. All I really want to enter is what changed.
Yeah. That's always the biggest pushback you get, right? When you get the guys out in the field, especially because I think that's kind of that baseline data, again, to your point, Joe, it is a byproduct, but nobody's really writing. If it's not getting written down, you don't get the byproduct, right? Well, the problem is, and this is what everybody runs into, is like, well, this stuff is supposed to be making my life easier, right? But it doesn't. This is the biggest complaint about current technology is, hey, this is supposed to be making my life easier, but it seems to me you're just adding more stuff onto my plate.
That's why, we're so passionate about putting your entire business in Foundry because, historically, every new problem you're solving. So if you have a scheduling problem, you got to get a new schedule software. If you have a time card problem, you need a time card application. Historically, you've been adding all these softwares up. So every solution required one more. This is the only point in time now where the solution, you can now start eliminating them and make it simpler. This is now the last software. You can have only one at this point now. So that's the thing that's changed.
All right. So probably going to get a lot of pushback on that. And this is an interesting topic because you've got the Procores out there. You've got the Revits out there. You've got all this stuff. You've bought massive amount, millions of dollars, right, in tech stack. And now, Palantir comes along and says, get rid of that. Now, is that true? Or does Foundry sit above it all? How does that work? Because that seems like it's a big, big mountain to climb.
Yeah. I think it's going to be a combination. Like, I don't think anyone's under the impression that the whole industry is able to change overnight, because there's, parts of your business are going to have to change with as you start to generate some of these solutions. So I think the one really important element is you can begin by tackling, a really specific pain point. We see a lot of customers going after their labor force management or equipment management and address a real business problem. But then you can build off of those solutions, and you can actually deprecate other standalone solutions, but you don't have to start by doing everything at once. So it can be a combination of integrating with the solutions that integrate well. Like maybe Procore is an awesome solution and that customer is really happy with it. So maybe you're integrating with it and building new features or capabilities that are standalone. So you can do a combination of, assimilate your ecosystem over time. It doesn't have to be all at once, because there's also an important piece of kind of change management, because at some point you bought a solution and you've now bent your business to fit how that particular SaaS solution works. So there's some work to undo that. We don't want to present it as, it's all rainbows and rosy. There's some real hard. The real work is actually the change management. It's now you're unencumbered. You don't have any excuses. How do you actually want to run your business?
So that's always been the thing, right? Plenty of tech solutions out there, but a lot of people are just skeptical of the change management process. Some number out there that I had read, been a couple years ago now, but some 70% of implementations fail is because they hand it to the wrong person. Maybe it just works for a couple weeks and then they're like, it's just not doing it. Right. Let's talk a little bit about that, and then what, how does Foundry approach that as far as in how did they get past that? Change management is a huge. Again, it's kind of like the word data. It's been used a lot, but what does it really mean? You can say change management and it sounds easy, but it is not easy at all. Like you can say data, but it doesn't mean that data's hard. Data's difficult.
Yeah, I think people confuse, buying a software with that organizational change. And it's, in the case of Foundry, it allows you to solve these problems if you are up to the challenge, right? Like just hitting the buy button doesn't magically solve all the problems. It now allows you to, and it's a total game changer. But there's still that element of change management, and Ryan could speak to what we did to make the thing stick in the field, and how we approach that change management.
Yeah, and I think I think what you're referring to, Robert, there with the stat that a lot of tech initiatives do fail, and often it's not because the technology itself didn't perform the function it was supposed to, but generating the right top down kind of buy-in. Does the organization understand? Do they understand the task? When you start surfacing this new information or this newfound information, you're integrating things. You actually have better visibility. When are people starting and finishing? When are they taking breaks? How often is my equipment idling? What kind of utilization am I getting? Do you have people in position to act on that and make a different business decision? Historically, if this stuff has been obscured, there might not be someone there. You've dialed the number and no one's on the other side of the phone to say, hey, you know what? This is a problem. We actually need to operate differently. And sometimes those decisions aren't easy to make. It's when things become unobscured. Sometimes there's some tough decisions to make. Maybe some people that shouldn't be there within your business don't need to be there anymore, or maybe you need a different type of talent that didn't exist. So it's a full pronged approach, I think, and it varies. Once again, it's just because you can go so narrow and solve something specific, but as you get broad, as we've done at Thomas Cavanaugh Construction, which is our anchor client now, there's a lot of complexity and there's a lot of hard work to do, and I would say a big piece of it lies outside of the technology entirely.
Yeah, well, let's get into that, Joe, because I really, again, this is something that everybody knows there's going to be tough questions to ask, but this is something you guys have gone through, and there were some hard conversations that had to be had. Let's discuss that a little bit.
Yeah, I think a simple example is, we have Foundry now. We built out a time carding application, a field time, review, or a field time capture application for those time cards to now land in. We got to the point where we're like, okay, now we want to automate some of that manual entry that the foreman and the folks filling out the tools are running up against. It's like, okay, let's automate the payroll policy. Okay, night shift, overtime, all that fun stuff. Well, what we found out quickly is like, do we actually have an agreed upon payroll policy? So it just forces you to say, okay, well, we got to get the whole group together, agree on what a night shift is. Not that anybody ever really disagreed. We just never, sat down and really hammered out, because in order to code it, we have to know without a shadow of a doubt what a night shift is, right? And it forces you to kind of go through this simplification process too, because the more complex it is as a policy, the more complex the code is. And so you get this cool forcing function where you get to really evaluate how simple can we make this thing and still get all the benefit, but speed up the process.
Right. Well, I always found when you get into that kind of solutions engineering stage, I had plenty of people there throwing in all the edge cases. We used to go, it's like, well, what about this? And what about this? And it might happen 2% of the time, or might happen 10% of the time. What do you throw in? What do you leave out is the question. Is there a workaround on that?
Way we've approached it is you solve for the 80%, and then we'll handle the edge cases. But you definitely don't want to make the exception the rule, because that's usually the reason why you don't do something. And that's usually the reason why you end up in the place you end up, is because you've allowed those exceptions to be the rule for all these years.
Yeah. And I've heard it said before, 80% is better. 80% done is better than 0% perfect. Something like that. I was like,
well, that's a good one. Well, it's funny enough, even a lot of those exceptions, as you pull the string or the thread far enough, you realize that's actually not the problem, and some other issue is the thing that's actually blocking it, And so, I don't know. I won't go into detail on that one, but there's just you uncover organizational stuff that.
Wait a minute! I think we touched a nerve. We touched a nerve over there.
It's not that this tool won't work for one part of the organization. It's that one part of the organization needs to actually fix how it operates a little bit. So you uncover a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, there you have it. And Ryan, I think you understand this just as well. I think we've ran into this as many times in our past conversation, we talked about this, is that a lot of times, and I feel like the age of AI, the ability to utilize these new tools is going to make us discover more about what we need to change in our operations than what technology needs to do to try to fix you. You need to fix yourself.
Yeah, and our actual, our value proposition as Cavtera is we say we help, businesses untangle the legacy systems and processes and then build the tools around the best way to work using Palantir Foundry.
Yeah, and I think it's, you brought up AI, and like that's the holy grail. That's what everyone's talking about. That's the stuff that's floating around in kind of the macro economy right now. I think a lot of businesses have realized this, and this isn't even limited to construction. You're moving in one of two directions. You're increasing complexity through natural growth and expansion with your business or acquisitions, and you're either adding more pieces of technology into your stack, or you've made the conscious decision that you want to go the other way. And that's something that Foundry allows you to do, is you got to start unwinding it back. I mean, large, the kind of multinational, builders, we know several, and, it's not uncommon for them to have 300 or 400 pieces of technology in their tech stack, because they bought company ABC in this jurisdiction, and they ended up with their time carding platform and their dispatch platform and scheduling. And they never adopted whatever the parent company was doing. So you can imagine what it's like to try and now integrate all of that for some future where you want to actually make AI operational. Well, if AI can't see something if it's not integrated, whatever LLM you're going to use, the better they get, great. If the data's in a silo somewhere, it's actually useless. It doesn't matter how great AI gets until you start creating the single source of truth, and you got to start winding it back. And, you can do that through one win at a time, and you can justify the spend kind of one win at a time. But this bigger picture, this North Star becomes available to you. And I think that's one of the real powers of Foundry.
So this gets back a little bit to what I was talking about, sitting above like everything, like your pro cores, your kind of tech stack. You need to tackle it kind of one at a time. But I want to talk about, because you mentioned legacy technology, and God knows that ERPs across the board are pretty much legacy tech. At one point ERPs were supposed to be the single source of truth for everything, and then BIM was supposed to be the single source of truth for everything, and now we're going to introduce large language models or whatever we're going to whatever we're going to do here. It seems like a lot to juggle, specifically on the ERP level. That gets very, very scary for folks. I mean, how does Palantir kind of approach it? How does Foundry kind of approach that? Do you want to recreate your ERP? That seems like a lot.
We think of it as we're de-operationalizing our ERP system, because I think that's one of the the things that we've done over the years, which is the inverse is operationalizing our ERP, meaning we've tried to force the ERP into operations. And we all know, ERPs aren't great at scheduling work or planning resources or doing any of that stuff operationally in the field, in the tools. Same with scheduling software. It's like nobody's ever successfully run a job off a P6 schedule day to day. There's all these shadow tools, Excel sheets and things like that. And so what you end up is, not only did you not have the source of truth, you now have all these shadow tools serving all the functions that those classic systems weren't able to do. And so you end up in a worse spot. Like operationalized ERP system has led to where we are.
Yeah, and always remember those shadow tools are being run by a C student who didn't pass algebra.
That's right. And left the company 10 years ago. And nobody knows how their sheet works.
How were they working that? I'm not sure.
That's a true story. Yeah.
Well, and it's funny, we're working with a group right now, and we're at this point where, some of the late, our industry has long had the label of being laggards in adoption. Now, you're actually seeing some of them now come to the table, and they're actually unencumbered by either not like having very little tech in their tech stack, like they're still paper based. And then for those companies to take a leap and now go all in with something like Foundry, in many cases, they actually have an easier time, because you're
not unwinding a bunch of stuff.
You're not unwinding, you're not unwinding their stack. They're actually just going directly now into, this all solving solution. So in many cases, they're able to kind of leapfrog over maybe some of the other, early adopting companies, which is which is something interesting. It wasn't really on my radar when we went to market with our solutions, but you're seeing them kind of skip ahead of the line in their progress.
It's actually an advantage for some of those companies. And the analogy we use is that, they didn't bury all the phone lines and have all the sunk costs in the infrastructure. They just went straight to cell phones. So you can make that leap.
Yeah.
Still need that fiber though. We got to have that fiber.
That's right.
Let's be clear. We got to have that fiber there. I find it interesting to talk to you guys about this because you guys have made the transition. Thomas Cavanaugh decided that this was the way we were going to go. Like I said, I had talked to you a couple of years ago, when I was still working at another company, and talked to you about, like we were talking about time tracking solutions and things like that. And it was, there's a lot of frustration around all these kind of peripheral, technologies that you have to even integrate into your ERP. And it seemed like and so you guys just walk the walk. And now you're not just talking the talk, you're walking the walk. You did the whole thing. So I kind of want to dive into that just a little bit to give us a little bit of background. I was like, what was it? I know it wasn't one thing, but what was the straw that just said, we've got to stop the madness here and go with this? Like, can you kind of give me an idea?
Yeah, it was actually organic with because originally we did start the same way everybody else starts with all those integrations. So we started with an initial use case with Palantir, and it was real-time costing. And so we started stitching together some of our traditional tools, our ERP system with our field time capture. But we realized really quickly that, though we could ingest all the data, you're beholden to the existing software schema if you want to read and write. And so what you find yourself doing is we called it breaking these tools, or we were running them at 110% capacity, meaning, okay, well, if we want costing on our truck utilization, well, we need a column or a mechanism to capture that data. And so when you talk to these other softwares, you say, can I have a column to enter in my trucks? And they say, no, we can't do that. And so,
and that's going to cost you.
Yeah. So it's either 3 to 6 months later or
just or not possible.
Yeah. And so we ended up doing things like you'd be tucking your truck numbers in the notes section and then using the description section for your notes. And then what are we doing? We kind of came to this realization that, well, what if we just built it in Foundry? And so after doing that 3 or 4 times, we said, yeah, what if we just built it all in Foundry? And so that was, part of our proposal to Cavanaugh was, hey, let's just do this all in Foundry and it'll be easier.
And I think, and to be fair, we've got a lot of stuff across the line, at Thomas Cavanaugh Construction, but we're very much still active. Some rocks are easier to overturn than others. And, we're definitely feeling some pain in some areas where we had lots of success in others. But I think the way you need to think about this is you need to find some pain points where you can derive some really clear value. But ultimately, this needs to be something that, the organization truly views as a North Star. Like they have a strong vision around this. It's communicated. It's bought in, ownership believes in it. You get the right stakeholders believing it. It's not something that's going to be done lightly. And it's, and those are the companies you're seeing step forward. And there's a lot of them saying, hey, we're ready to take charge of this. We're not going to passively let AI decide or let, a particular solution, choose our destiny for us. You got to be very deliberate in deciding to do that, in supporting that, at all levels. It's not just a technology or an HR or change management. You kind of have to take this holistic view because it's a big challenge, but the gains are huge when you can cross that threshold. The treasure is sweet on the other side if you get that.
And again, it's a big risk when you talk about doing this because, there is the potential of failure, right?
All change is risk. Yeah. Change is expensive and risky.
Yeah. Change is expensive and risky. This is what most people are looking at. When I talk to clients and talk to folks about this kind of stuff, my question is always this: well, what do you want it to look like 5 years from now? Do you want it to be in the same space that you are today? And a lot of them are. Sometimes they don't. They just go, well, they just nod their head, but they don't really give you an answer because they can't really answer the question. They can't really say what. And the way that I'm seeing things, the way that, that from what I'm reading and from what the information I'm gathering, it's like there's a lot that's going to be changing here in the next 5 years that we really, in the construction industry, in any business, whatever, we're really going to have to start thinking about different ways of approaching these. Sometimes we're going to have to face our demons, right? And that gets to the whole talk about no matter what you do, and it wouldn't matter if you're out there, you decide to go with Cavtera and you decide to go with Palantir Foundry. It doesn't matter if you're going to use Procore's new solution or try to use their AI, whatever you're going to try to do. Folks, I want you to understand, and these guys are probably here to testify about it, you are going to have to face those demons that are in front of you. You're going to have to face those bottlenecks, the things that are causing you problems today. Doesn't matter what you choose. They're still going to face you tomorrow if you don't get in front of them.
No, and building off of that, there's a cost to inaction. There's risks to doing nothing. The wait and see crowd. The risk is what if your competitor figures it out. First. That's the cost is maybe just less visible, or it's spread out within your organization. All of these fractional losses or these fractional inefficiencies, and it's easier to point at. When you go to spend money, that's a singular thing you can look at and say this is what it's gonna cost me. But there's a real cost to sitting on the sidelines and just seeing how this whole thing is gonna pan out. So yeah, it's.
I think this is a lot of times. I think we all know it. I know even my little bitty, my little construction business. I spend the money somewhere on the things that. It's spent somewhere. It might be in soft costs, time here, time there. The money gets spent somehow. It's just like, how long are you willing to spend it? Or would you rather, bite the bullet for a little bit, really attack what you need to go and do and get it done. So we're not eliminating any bottlenecks here, folks. What we're doing is we're just trying to find you a better way to get through them.
Yeah, and I think. It's not a perfect analogy, but one thing I like to think about is, what's the ROI of having the internet? When the internet was new and it was coming about, or point your finger at the one place where you got the return on that. Like we can't imagine a world where that's where the internet doesn't exist and your business isn't doing, you're not doing business offline. But it's probably that transformational, if not more transformational, which also, it creates this whole other set of challenges because it becomes, a fabric or interwoven within your business, so that's why I was saying you kind of have to pick off the things that are obvious, but there's going to be this, the sum's going to be greater than the parts. And that part of it's going to be harder to measure, but it's, it's what price you put on being able to operate your business the way you want to operate it, or operate more efficiently.
Yeah.
That's what you have to be aiming for.
So Purdue University just came out today and said that every student will have to take some sort of AI course. And they're the first university. I'm a Boilermaker, so I just had to throw that out there. Just a little shout out to Purdue University for, making this happen. I believe that this is an important step. I work with AI every day. I do everything I can to try to learn more about it and get better with it. Joe, I want your thoughts on that. We're going to, in the construction industry, we're going to have to start learning this. We're going to have to start using it. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I have a very construction worker take on it, which is, lucky for us, we don't actually have to build the LLMs. We don't technically have to train the models. What we need to do is actually organize, our businesses in a way that we can take advantage of it. And the simplest analogy I have is, could you imagine if your entire life ran through ChatGPT, right? Like most of us have logged in and asked it questions and had to do things for us, but could you imagine if every soccer practice and oil change and bank transaction and funeral and everything you can think of in your life was organized through ChatGPT? How great would it be at giving you insights like, hey, you better leave in 5 minutes because you're going to be late because traffic's heavy. Everybody can kind of grasp that analogy, and that's actually what we're building here. Everybody likes to get caught up in, in the AI itself, or how do we do AI? And it's like, no, you layer AI on top of the context of your business or your life. And when you build it that way, you're able to take full advantage of these LLMs.
Brian?
Yeah. And I think, at the field level, one thing I like to think about is you would just ultimately you want to be able to ask plain language questions, about your business. Who's the subcontractor? How am I getting paid for this work? What quarry do I need to be pulling material from? Who's the supplier for this? When's my truck going to be here that I ordered? It's until you run your business, within a single source of truth, and you're operating in a unified way, it's really hard to answer those questions. Or it's and that's what the field needs, that plain language capability. They just need the answer, and these are answers that they're calling the office for. They're going into the back of the truck and flipping through the field binder for, and it's how changes don't get made and updated in the in the root folder, so they didn't see that change order or that change to the drawings. So when you operate, in one cohesive platform, Foundry or otherwise, that's kind of, to me, that's one of the, major milestones for our industry, is arming the field with the kind of this plain language interaction. And, and then that kind of evolves into taking action. Like, hey, I need some more pipe, send me more pipe. I just want to say that into my phone, and I want the right supplier at the right unit price with the right delivery method, show up to the right place. And, right now that's there's a lot of coordination just to facilitate that simple request. And you start thinking about what has Amazon done for us, and what has Uber done for us? How do we turn those tools into things that operate that way for construction?
Ryan just nailed it, which is, and I'll just add to it selfishly, is, we all know what it looks like when you have an application or a tool integrate seamlessly with reality. Sounds abstract again, but when I think about, we'd spend all this time planning and scheduling our construction work, and then you'd walk out on site and it felt like a totally different world of reality. All the work you just did there wasn't actually what you were facing in the field, right? Like there's the realities of the site. It felt disconnected. I'm having a hard time explaining what I mean, but I think most construction workers will get it, where the inverse of that is like, you order an Uber, you watch the dot on the screen blink towards you, and then you look out the window and there he is. Right. And that's where you have a tool integrated seamlessly with reality. Whereas construction, we don't have that right now. And so what we're talking about is building those tools that integrate, the digital side of our life with the physical side. And we haven't yet done that in construction. So Ryan nailed it.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. I mean, I was at a meeting not so long ago, and one of the supervisors was like, Rob, can you just make it so that it's easy? Can we just walk up? It was really about kind of like a check-in, check-out kind of thing. Is like, can we just walk into the job site? I mean, and get checked in, checked out, and we don't have to do anything, right? Because his analogy was, well, he went to a baseball game and he had bought the ticket online, and I don't know how it all worked, but I come to find out it was like some high dollar system, but walked into this main stadium and it just biofacialed you right there. You just walked through. They did the scan on him, and he didn't even have to show a ticket, didn't have to do anything. It biofacialed him because of the way he bought his ticket. And it was like, why don't we just do that? And I was like, well, okay, I get but this is what, kind of to your point, like, we watch the dot and the car shows up. You know what I mean? It's reality based. This works. Why can't we do it for construction? Why does it seem so difficult?
Technology shortage. We have an actual tool shortage. We don't have the tools in the field to do that. We have the technology.
Yeah, we do. A lot of times the biggest complaint, and you guys tell me about it, it's connectivity. It's like, I don't get internet on my site, or it's spotty, or I don't get it on my phone. Like they're using this, iPhone 3, whatever, and it's not there for them or something like that. So I feel like that's changing.
Mm-hmm. Starlink's been a game changer. And that's a good example of like solving a different problem where people say, well, we don't have site connectivity, therefore we can't do Palantir. It's like, well, actually, let's just go solve the site connectivity problem instead of trying to make Palantir work offline or do something like that. It's like, why don't we just throw up Starlink at every site, or have, a Pelican case with a router in it that you can take in your truck or wherever. It's like, solve that problem. But so often we download all of the friction around it to the, the tool itself you're trying to solve the problem with. It's like, no,
right.
Just pull the thread all the way back to solve the connectivity problem.
Well, I think it gets back to kind of this first principles, kind of thing. We don't solve for, we look at it and it's like up till now, we've had to have stuff that worked offline because we've had really no opportunity for connectivity. But Starlink, to your point, has kind of changed the game on that, because now I can open that thing up and, point it up at the sun or wherever I point it to, and bam, you've got connectivity. And it's, I don't know what that is a month or, what it would cost. Doesn't matter, because now what you've done is you've totally gotten rid of the whole excuse of no connectivity, and you've gotten rid of the excuse of like real time, analytics from the job site.
Yeah. And I think, our industry we need that flexibility, because you're going to have some companies that, connectivity is going to be the bottleneck, or, hey, we don't have users that, only half our workforce uses a smartphone, or we're slightly, our vertical integration is our business. We only buy material. We don't supply ourselves. So there needs to be this element of customization, and, the solutions have to be bespoke for the business. And, and that's why traditionally there hasn't been a one SaaS to rule them all for construction, because construction is such a broad term and we always talk about it as one thing. But there's, hundreds of different iterations of construction companies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they all have different challenges, and they've got better at solving, different companies have got better at solving, certain parts of their business compared to others. So they may start their journey in a different way. And
scale, important. Yeah. Scale is a big deal, folks. It really is. I run a very, very small carpentry company, and that's totally fine by me because I enjoy what I do. I don't necessarily need Starlink, Yeah. But if I'm working on a civil job or something like that, and I've got 25 miles to cover and I need to be able to do this, that, and the other, and somewhere in that 25 miles, I may not get connectivity or something like that, I'm going to need it. Right. And so again, scale is everything. The scale multiplies all of the issues by, whatever the size change is. Maybe it's 100x, maybe it's 10x, whatever it is, but scale makes a difference. And you got to get back to the whole, hey, is this really our problem? I think that was kind of your point, Joe. It's like, is the technology really your problem, or is it the fact that you just are too cheap to buy Starlink and get yourself hooked up?
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, usually, a lot of the time it is, you got to ask the 5 whys and really get down to the what are you trying to solve? Because more often than not, you're treating symptoms and not the problem. And, even ourselves, as we went all in Foundry, we'd get asked, well, we just want cost reporting. What are you doing over there in dispatch? And so, as you pull the thread, it's like, well, if you want truck costs, the best way to get them is to order your trucks through the system. And so you end up over in places you didn't think, as we always just call it pull the thread all the way. But, it's funny. Sometimes the way to solve the problem isn't the way you thought, but you got to be open to pulling that thread all the way.
Yeah. Well, it comes full circle back to, really understanding what your ontology is, right? Understanding what are the true nouns and verbs of your whole system. And to your point, which string are you pulling when you talk about said noun or said verb? And where does that come from? Where does it really tie back to? And it's been a fantastic journey here just today. We're going to do a couple more of these episodes, folks. So Joe and Ryan, thank you for your 45 minutes here today, just talking about, kind of illuminating a little bit about, what really is Palantir Foundry. I'm hoping we shed some light on it. But in the next couple, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the product. And so I'm looking forward to it.
Yep. Same.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Robert. Same here. It's always a pleasure. And I've never been more hopeful, for our industry. And, we really want to move the needle, and we know we're not alone in that.
Yeah. Well, I think you guys are doing a great job, and I appreciate you guys being here with me today. But until next time, folks, we're going to be talking about Palantir some more. We're going to dive a little bit deeper. I'm not going to give you all the clues, but we're going to do about 3 of these and really kind of dive a little bit deeper. But thanks, guys. Appreciate you. And we'll see y'all next time.
Thank you.